and I was challenged. Well, Patrick came up with this. You won't believe my research on Saturn in Pisces, and I've been thinking about recording Saturn in Pisces for a while. And I said I'm not gonna open this thread because if I'm recording something, I like to record first and then watch what other people did. That's how I challenge myself. So, Saturn in Pisces. Um, Pisces. Well, Saturn first. Bones, nails, hair, teeth, time, rings, um, mm, 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 rocks and therefore crystals, mountains. I can't shoot you there. So Pisces, the ocean, things that don't have things that don't. I'm thinking about verbs like many versus much. So Pisces would be much because many is countable and much is not. So the things that we can't quantify, that we can't count, that are too fluid for that, um, the great vast um, ocean, and therefore also the depths of the ocean, a huge range of emotions, water sign, um, the, the, the intuition of the ocean. Well, Saturn would probably be the intuition of time and being timely, and the intuition of grounded reality. Um, that's about to happen. That's about to happen. The intuition of implications of actions. That would probably be the Saturn type of intuition. Um, so let's start with combining them. Okay, and of course, Pisces is Jupiter and Neptune ruled. I do use modern rulers. Um, and so Pisces stuff is also medicine, the type of medicine that gets you dizzy, um, psychedelics, um, anesthesia. Saturn. Oh my gosh. Now I'm getting something. Okay. You know, in Switzerland, there's this technology called sacro. So it's mortal. It's deadly. Detox, suicide ideation, all those things trigger. So if you have tendency to suicide ideation, deadly things, and all that, um, please, I'd rather have you stop watching than you're being in trouble because of a YouTube video. So that's a trigger warning. I was thinking, because Saturn is death and ending of things, it's letting go, and Pisces can be anesthesia. So we could have, and Saturn is also rules and regulations. So we could have rules and regulations where more countries consider assisted suicide in cases that are also more emotional. Because it's Pisces. It's not necessarily only for physical conditions. So I was thinking that, like, I can't shoot you, can't shoot you. I'm doing doggy sitting and I don't want to show pets that I did not get permission to show. Um, so, so I was thinking that that could be the case. And, with Saturn in Pisces, there's the sense that people who are more sensitive could have suicide ideation because Saturn is the harsh reality, it's the contraction. And Jupiter is the lungs, it's the expansion. Um, well, breath work. So Saturn is also cold and hard conditions. So I would say a blooming of a sort of Wim Hof, because Wim Hof is icy water and intense breathing that brings longevity, which is actually a feature of Saturn. Jupiter is the benefic, but Saturn is also something that has long duration. It takes a long time. So it's also longevity. Um, and so, blooming of Wim Hof methods to treat things. Um, Regulations concerning, rules and regulations parts so concerning oceanic related things. Water territories. I don't know about water pollution. Like, I wouldn't be hurried to be, but because Saturn is also time and the accumulation implication, what people call karma, of something that we've been doing over time, so we may see the implication of whatever nuclear stuff. The nuclear stuff is not Saturn related, but whatever we've been doing with our oceans in terms of environment, that's not right, then we might get to deal with the implications. And so the level of, but this is more ocean waters. It's not like rivers and lakes, but more ocean waters. Damage to lives in the ocean, pollution of the water. And again, pollution not because of Saturn, but because we sort of get to deal with the implication to how we've been treating the water in the past 28 years. And now Saturn comes, it's like, okay, what's with the oceans? What do we need to contract? What do we need to regulate? What do we need to control? What do we need to let go? What habits do we need to release? Okay. Sort of like, what are our gains and losses? And also the things that we've been doing well. Um, so that can be um, in the body. It can play out as having effect on Saturn related things like bones, nails, hair, teeth, skin, because of emotional reasons, and because Pisces is also Jupiter ruled, it can be stress because Jupiter rules the lungs, and it can be if we've been moving our body, because Pisces rules the feet, and feet is also how do we walk? Do we walk? Do we move our body more like walking or running? That can contribute to good cardiovascular health and then good health for the lungs. And so, if we've been doing well, we might be getting good gains, good health with that. Or this could be a remedy, or this could be something that we will tend to do. But whatever our hair or our nails or our bones will deal with when Saturn is in Pisces, it will be due to emotional, psychological reasons, or to how we breathe, or to how we walk, on how much we walk, okay, how stable we are. Um, Alternatively, we can tend to our feet, anything feet related, so the skin, the nails, the bones of the feet. This is a good time to get yourself good reflexology treatment. This is a good time to tend to your nails. This may be actually um, a good time to get rid of dead skin and all the holistic aspect of doing that. So, getting rid of the past or tending to the holistic aspect of healing your nails or healing your skin or tending to your feet. So it can be getting good results because you've been doing that, and now you deal with some that, or perhaps it's sugar related because Jupiter is also sugar. And then because you've been doing well, then you get good effects. Okay, you get good results with your health. Or alternatively, this would be a good time, even when Saturn is still in Aquarius, this would be a good time to tend to your feet. Um, Anything health, the health of the feet related, and therefore also the base chakra, also to your roots and ancestors. It's a good time to do ancestral healing because healing Pisces, Neptune, an intuiting spiritual connection with the dead, Saturn. So ancestral healing or healing of ancestral wounds, connecting with the dead. Saturn in Pisces is excellent for that because it's intuiting or feeling, but because Pisces is emotional, you want to make sure you clear your energy very, very well because it is very much embodiment. It's not so visual, but more feeling based. So you could have a feeling based conversation with that which is in the other realm, with that which is in the great beyond. Because Saturn is also dead in the dead. So communication with the dead. Um, and of course, because Saturn is the dead, then what what type of people might die is Neptunian people and Piscean people. So it could be people with placements in Pisces. It doesn't mean that you're gonna die. I mean, I also have a Pisces ascendant. It doesn't mean that you're gonna die if you have Pisces placements. Um, it does mean that the type of people who may die might be those sensitive musicians or people who are dealing with the ocean or with exploring the oceans, fishermen. Really, it's that simple. Okay, that's the type of people we might say goodbye to um, if that's their time to go. Time. And oh, scientifically, Neptune is that which is not quantifiable. So it can be waves, it can be types of energies, it can be a perception of time that is more intuitive, or a perception of time that is wave related. Think about light years. What is light years? It's a measurement of the time it takes to get to another place. So we measure space by time. Okay? Um, Here we might again see time as a sort of a wave, as a sort of a frequency, not necessarily a flight, but because it is, it's both Pluto rich in Aquarius and if you think about what affects the oceans, the tides of the oceans, it's gravity waves. So we might conceptualize time as gravity related. That if I make, Pluto come into Aquarius and then Saturn in Pisces. So Saturn in Pisces may contribute to that perception. Other things we might see with Saturn in Pisces. Um, fish. Okay, I mentioned the implications of pollution, temperature, climate change. We might see dead fish, like literally dead fish. Okay, fish that are dying, fish that are dead. Um, our ability to consume fish, our accessibility to fish that are healthy. It can be also ailment with fishes because Neptune rules like a viral thing, and it can be like a viral ailment. So viruses, and Pisces is fish, right? So it can be dead fish because, or people that may die because of viruses in fishes. That is, or viruses in seafood in general. The quality of our seafood. Okay, we now, what have we been doing with our sea for the past, with our oceans for the past 28 years? Any food we have coming from the ocean, we're gonna see the implications for that. If we've been doing good, the food is going to be good. If we were not being doing good, we're gonna have to find a way to change that so that the food can improve, so that our oceans can improve. And that will bring, the rules and regulations. So rules and regulations also around, seafood, anything that is within the ocean. Um, for scientific exploration of the ocean, I don't know. Again, it may be related to the concept of time and gravity, and so we may be looking at oceans and measuring tides or measuring something like that, but I'm not sure. Um, time, rocks. Oh, if I think about, global change or global warming is interesting to say because we also have unusual coldness, not just unusual heat. So unusual coldness. Saturn is cold things. Saturn in Pisces in a peculiar way can actually bring a bit of a sense of cooling rather than heating, because it's not about the melting of rocks. That would more be Saturn Pluto, like explosion of a volcano. There's a melting of the core of something, um, or Pluto, Saturn, Mars. That can be something like that. But with Saturn, that is something cold. We can actually see cooling. We can actually see. But you have to remember, this is I don't remember exactly how long this time it will be, but it's no longer than 3 years in all. So this is no longer than 3 years. It's not something that we can count on when we look at global climate change, but we may experience a bit of cooling of these large bodies of water. So icy water, more icy water, that can be. Um, but it does not mean, because Saturn in Pisces is not long enough, it's not like an ice age, and it's also probably not going to tame the effect of climate change by in itself. But it does mean that we can expect to see more icy oceans, more icy oceans, cooling of the oceans, contracting of the oceans. um, but due to something cool, not because Saturn is something very cold, due to something cool, not necessarily due to heat. Um, anything Saturn, Pisces, rocks, crystals. Hmm. Well, perhaps crystal healing. Um, it can be even rules and regulations around crystal healers, perhaps followed with scientific advancement as to how crystal healing works, because of the tendency of Saturn to be concrete, but it doesn't necessarily, it's not in itself. We would need a Mercury there. We would need more than the Uranus that we got, and we're not going to have a lot of Uranus there. But definitely, there can be rules and regulations about what we do with crystals, how do we source our crystals, um, but not necessarily how do we source in terms of flavor, but more um, perhaps those crystals related to Pisces, but also um, crystal healing, because Pisces is a lot about healing energy, and Saturn is concrete. It wants to know who is a charlatan, who is telling the truth. Okay. So there may be an introspection into that, but we have to understand that Saturn comes to Pisces not equipped. So those rules and regulations might not necessarily mean that those that Saturn deemed um, charlatans or people that should not do crystal healing are necessarily not healers. Okay, because Saturn is not equipped in Pisces. Saturn is ruling Capricorn and it's ruling Aquarius traditionally. It's ruling over logic and the cold ground. It's not ruling over oceans and things you can't quantify. Okay, so it's not going to do well in regulating the ocean. And this is also something we need to understand. We may come with rules and regulations about what we've been doing to oceans, how we've been doing energy healing or sound wave healing, or listening to whales and all that. And Saturn may say, no, this is mumbo jumbo, but it's actually not. Okay, because Saturn is not equipped to deal with that, but it does deal with rules and regulations. So it's not happy in Pisces. It's not happy in Pisces. And so we may see that while the people who have overstretched the boundaries of the Piscean liquidity, being contracted, being weeded out, we might see perhaps less tolerance for people that we should listen to, like musicians, okay? Like artists, like people who express themselves non-verbally, and non-verbally, artistic that is non-verbally. It may also mean rules and regulations about um, the the royalties and who deserves royalties. I don't see that regulating AI, only maybe with the art perspective, but this is again, we would need more than Saturn there. We would need a technology involved planet there. We need a Mercury there, would need a Uranus there, and we don't have that Uranus there when Saturn moved to Pisces. Um, so this is something important. Maybe only we might have an inconjunct, but I think not even that. Maybe. Um, and there can be rules and regulations around creativity and creative rights. That can be. So that can be even in favor of artists to not to have, you know, what they create is just spreading out there without them being able to control it. But it's not coming with the new technology. So the it can be like the governments make a rule that I don't know, you can't let's say if somebody created an NFT, you can't just trade it like crazy, but it's not backed up by technology, so we can't really implement that. So there can be rules and regulations that we can't really implement. It can be, trying to make many of something that is much, trying to make something quantifiable when it's not. So trying to regulate in a field that doesn't ascribe to regulation. That can bring funny outcomes. Um, Other things with Saturn, mountains and oceans. Well, perhaps in terms of space exploration, I don't know. maybe the mountains underneath the ocean. So we might inspect into the ground of the oceans, the depth of the oceans, because there are mountains that are underneath the surface of the sea, and we might observe them. We might look into them. We might be aware of them, or they might play a certain role in our ecosystem because Saturn also rules, the signs of high mountains and the signs of agriculture. So the ecosystem in the sea. What's at the depth of the sea? There are mountains there. Okay? There are mountains underneath the sea. This is just the Pisces things. There are mountains underneath the sea. But that's Pisces. That's actually Pisces, right? Saturn in Pisces. There are mountains underneath the sea. You should see them. Um, what else? Trying to combine Saturn thing. Well, I'm sure there's a lot more. Um, just well, Saturn is also taking breaks. Um, being mindful, observation that is inner, the sea within, all those kind of analogies that could come to mind. But meditating could be to do with the sea, to do with the ocean within, the great vast within, the void within, observing the void, inviting the void within. That is something um, that Saturn can look into. Um, Near death experiences, observation into them, but again, not necessarily as sciencey, but more like an inner teaching or a retreat where a person observes those things. Um, Perhaps regulations over psychedelics, regulations over anesthesia, regulations over trying to experience the great vast, or narcotics that could bring to those near that experience like experiences. Being regulated, again, Saturn is contraction. And Saturn is also hierarchy, so it's trying to create a hierarchy in a place that is not hierarchical. Again, this could bring very funny results. It's like trying to create, because Saturn can also rule a state that is contraction, that is lack. It's like what it's trying to think, oh, what is more important for us to tackle right now? Breathing, you know, it's like breathing or drinking water, clear water or clear air. What is more important for us to put, to tackle first? And it's like both of them. We don't have a hierarchy between breathing and having clear water. We need both of them to have life. But Saturn regulating things and trying to create a hierarchy. One thing, think about Monty Python, the ministry of putting things on top of other things. But this one really being really funny because it can try to put things on top of other, try to put this water on top of that water. Saturn might try to do that. Because that's what it comes with measuring things that take long time, bring in consequences, being logical, um, and putting things on top of other things, and then in the ocean. So we can have a very satirical, and Saturn is also the ruler, so it's very satirical rulers that are actually being very serious and think that they are doing well. And they're putting things on top of other things. They're talking about consequences, but they're in the ocean. And they're like, what are you talking about? This is not a place for you, but you can't tell this to a planet. It's like you need to host, you need to be a well host. So it can be very satirical. Rulers can do things and be very satirical. It can put to ridicule the essence of being Saturnian. And all the while, there still are things to do for Saturn in Pisces. It's good to look at the implications of what we've been doing to the oceans and the mountains in the underneath the sea, and the fishes and nourishment and the ecosystem of the ocean, and the rocks and the minerals that are there. It's not a bad thing to do. We need to do that. Okay, there's something for Saturn to do, but uh, but still, this domain is not really Saturnian. Still, Saturn is going to use Saturn measurements to deal with that, but this is the great vast, and it can be funny. Um, but also that there can be important things done. Okay, there can be important things that can still be done. If Pisces ruled traditionally by Jupiter, it's like the ever expansion that can bring certain sort of bubbles. Saturn is the bursting of these bubbles, and it's like, okay, we have this reality that we can expand, but there are also the limitations. So think about a small fish trying to swim into the depth of the sea, and Saturn just comes like his bigger brother fish that directs his way back to to more shallow water, because it's like there are sharks there. And that fish is so excited it wants to go to the depth of the sea, but his bigger brother fish is just using maybe the bodies to like, no, you stay here where you can still breathe, where you can still be nourished when you're still not in danger of the big fishes of the sea. So Saturn can do that. Think about in business, blue ocean strategy, delving into a blue ocean. I'm going to go and have a floating house in the Pacific. And Saturn comes and says, do you know how many ships have gone missing that we have yet found their traces? And you want to build, a sustainable floating house at the Pacific. So that's something that Saturn can actually do, that we do need. um, they think about Pisces in the fourth house, floating house in the Pacific. Um, Other things, more Saturn in Pisces. The skin within, the inner layers of the skin. Um, so again, being aware of what's within, being aware of the fluids in the body. Um, Being aware of our steps, aware of our feet. So, being aware of how our ancestors saw the sea. Oh, perhaps discovery of those ships, wrecks of ships underneath the ocean. Discovery of the wrecks of planes and ships and things gone missing in the oceans. More things that we discover. We're discovering the dead things in the oceans too. This is why it can be very depressing because we it's not just, you know, it's not the discovery of the life underwater kind of thing. It's the discovery of those things that are dead at the realm of Pisces. What's dead in the ocean? How big, how quantifying the destruction of the oceans. I'm getting so depressed when I just think about this. It's very, very depressing. It's very sad. But within the discovery of dead, we might also solve some mysteries that were unsolved, like finding wrecks of ships that we didn't know of. Okay, if we agree to speak with that which is dead, we may have a discovery there. We may have something set at ease. We may have an ending or a closure. Maybe people who had missing people may discover, um, you know, but and that discovery, while sad as it is, it sets certain parts of the soul at ease of knowing what happened, and then that is loss and that is death. Um, because Neptune is also ruling missing things. So, underneath the realm of Saturn, we may end the mystery, and then we may have, you know, some people that have been missing. Some people might discover, you know, their dead bodies, um, and or in bodies of water or something like that, and that is very, very depressing. But it might also bring this ending to mysteries, to mystery stories, to missing people, or missing things, but also missing, you know, rocks, missing mountains, um, minerals. Um, Saturn in Pisces. Well, what else do we have at the sea? Shipping. With Saturn in Pisces, there can be delays around shipping, traveling in a ship, sailing. There can be delays around that. There can be rules and regulations for those floating sea houses, floating houses, rules and regulations. You know, when I was in Amsterdam, there was a person who had a floating house, and he had to, you know, to to do his needs by the bathroom in the police because he could not empty his, you know, he could not empty his bathroom to the sea because it was regulated. You could not pollute the canals. Okay, so back there it was canals, but think of open bodies of the ocean. there can be rules and regulations, like you cannot pollute there. So you're gonna have to, you're gonna have to, you know, take your piss or number two in some more adaptable place. So you can have a floating house, which is very expensive, but not be able to go to the bathroom in your own house. Um, so, but also shipping, sailing, cruise ships. There can be delays about that. It can be delays because of a virus. It can be delays because of, I hope not COVID, but hey, you never know. Can be rules and regulations about these things. It's not so easy to sail. Um, Perhaps something to do, I think about the Titanic, because the Titanic, the story was that it sank because it collided in an iceberg. This is completely Saturn in Pisces. So, an event like that could set rules and regulations around when, there is we talk about everybody's like the Queen Elizabeth is dead, but the Queen Elizabeth for me, it was the ship that goes from Europe to the United States or through Alaska. And that's a great sailing, a grand sailing for, I think, a month in the open sea. So those types of sailings can run into difficulties, or alternatively, sailing in icy water can become an attraction. How about sailing to Norwegian, sailing to Alaska, sailing to Iceland? Those can become attractions. Or alternatively, there can be problems, there can be delays with sailing because of icebergs, because of something icy or something rocky that that we run into, or because of a virus. This is also because Pisces is also ruled by Neptune, and virus, yes, it can be long related, unfortunately. Um, what's more? So we talked about medicine, oceans, people in general. You're going to experience that in your life. Pisces house is, first of all, where's Pisces for you? Okay, that might determine. Let's say it's your seventh house, so you're going to get a reality check to all your one-on-one relationships. It's not just your spouse; it can be your boss, it can be your partner, your business partner. Yes, it can be the neighbor in front of you. You might get a reality check for some idea or regulation for this relationship or establishment of this relationship. You could get married. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Um, Saturn is also a commitment that we take. So we may have new commitments in all the topics that I mentioned. A commitment to preserve the ocean. But again, because Saturn is in Pisces, and the implementation for that might be a bit, liquid. Um, so you need to take a look at the house. Where is it happening? The 12 houses. And then what's in there? If you have a good aspected placement, then you're going to tackle it differently. You might have a bit of contraction. If you have, let's say, a Jupiter in Pisces, then you're maybe overexpanding, and now Saturn comes and like, okay, it, expansion is good, but we also have these rules and regulations. We also have this structure that we need to tackle. Creative business dealing with regulations and rules. So on the one hand, you say, somebody may, promise you royalties for your creative endeavors, but the implementation of this, it doesn't make sense. Okay, I think about the recent, I think it was Beyonce that was on the news, having 20, 20 something writers for a song that all needs to get the royalties. So if you say, oh, you're gonna get royalties for having, two words written in that song, then you find out 40 other writers entitled to royalties, and the royalties are kind of spread within them, so you get, a drop in the ocean. And that's something that can happen. Let's say if it's in your eighth house, or you're related to your fifth, or related to your third, or to your second, then that's something that might turn out for you, and you're like, oh, I'm going to get royalties. That's changed, and then you find out that it's a piece in the, it's like tiny, because Saturn, it doesn't care. It wants to spread the money. It wants to spread the water into tiny, that everybody will get their share, and then there is a hierarchy, and then you find out you're just like, I'm gonna get royalties, and then it's like, 2 cents for a hit song. um, but this is also, regulations in the music business. If you're in the music business, okay, you might find that the regulations, the implementation of them for you is not what you thought, or it's very difficult to implement something. Again, if your song made, let's say, $60 last week, and you have to divide it between 40 writers that need to get royalties, plus you, plus pay this, plus pay that, so it's like, okay, how much am I making with this? But perhaps before that, you recorded this album, and you expand it, and you're like, oh my gosh, that person wants to work with me, and that person wants to work with me. And oh, there's this program when I can sample these 60 songs and make a song out of them, and it's all, that they're all going to get their money. It's all going to be okay. It's all, and then you find out that, you don't get a cent from this, because you can't actually divide the money, because it doesn't make any currency that is divisive. That's literally something that can happen with Saturn in Pisces. Um, so, all these creators that got excited, I'm on Beyonce's album, and then, they get 2 cents. It's like, oh, she does it, but it's not her fault. She just made all these, big samples. And that's one example where I can see that. I can literally see that's already started happening. And then people are upset because they didn't understand what was actually going on. It seemed fair, you know, and it's not necessarily anybody's fault, because again, Saturn is trying to do his job in a domain that is very difficult to quantify. Think about credits for channeling mediumship. It's very difficult. And also, story writing is very expressing yourself artistically is channeling. Okay, so you could have more than one person channeling the same creation, or a very similar sounding creation, and there can be problems around that. And Neptune is also something foggy, something unclear, and then people might not be believed even though they're telling the truth. Alternatively, people might not be telling the truth in music industry, artistic endeavors, oceanic pollution, oceanic industries, fish, food, seafood restaurants, even, that can go there. um, So, this is something that can be an occurrence in your life. Um, Emotionally, this is something that we need to tackle, because emotionally, Pisces in general is deeply emotional, and it experiences the depth of emotions. And so it can get overflown. Saturn is concrete reality. Now, Saturn does not make too much sense in Pisces. But what it brings emotionally to the table is dead things. Deadline, dead end road, dead, dealing with the dead, communicating with the dead. So in channeling with the dead, it can be the most pleasurable experience of these things. Because the dead can tell you beautiful stories and they can tell you of the life beyond, or they can find, the great mystery, the great vast, that that that's beautiful. um, but it also brings death to the table, and but Pisces is very emotional, is incredibly emotional. And so every word has an energy, as a set of visuals. What asteroids we have? Do we have Fomalhaut tropically? We have Fomalhaut there. Um, so sensing into the psyche, and then Saturn comes to it and try to create a form for that. So that can also bring a kind of transit with the person suddenly finally gets to create what they have been envisioning to create. It's like they finally get to sit down and, write that book, record that album already, uh, do that creative project, paint those paintings, just make the dedication to do that. That can be the time when a person does that, when a person is actually being creative outside, not just innerly. That they actually put in the work in creating something in the physical form. This is when, creativity is set in stone. That's Saturn in Pisces. So it can, while it is a very contracting, and this, when you create something, if you're the type of person where you see something and then, you try to express it, and then the skill to express it, learning the skill to paint all those shades that you see. So while it can be a wonderful time, it can also be a time where a person has this big idea, big creation, they feel into something they want to express, and then they record it and they go, ah, and they have to put in the work so that it would sound like something beautiful. And what it will sound like in the third dimension might not be how it sounded in the 11th dimension. That it's not necessarily called harsh reality, but with Saturn in Pisces you might see it as something that's like, I'm not satisfied with that, it should be sounding different, it should be refined, it should be this, it should be that. And and another person might hear it and say, wow, this is outerworldly. But for you, it's too mundane. Okay, and that is the difficulties with being creative that can come up. But then it can also mean that the Piscean placement, if that is creativity related for you, it can also mean that you finally create. For me, Saturn in Pisces, it took me so long to record a Saturn in Pisces. Oh my gosh. Until I recorded Saturn in Pisces, and there I'm sitting there with the camera aiming at the light of some porch, and it looks so weird. But I'm finally doing that. 54 minutes into it. I'm finally, so something that was Saturn is delay, but it is also execution of something. Not execution like, the Plutonian execution, the guillotine. It's an execution in the sense of climbing that mountain, going that step by step. It might not look like, your fantasies, but you're finally doing that. And guess what? It's way better than if you would not have, if you hadn't recorded that video, if you haven't painted that painting, that would have been way worse than making that step to record and making that step to be creative, step by step. That's also Saturn in Pisces. achieving great creative things that take a lot of time and dedication. That is also Saturn in Pisces. And now you're finally doing that. You're finally able or even forced to deal with that contraction of bringing something into life that is weird to you when you listen to it, but it does make sense. You have created something here in the physical form that people can listen to, that people can feel, that people can relate to. With all the insecurities and anxieties and fears, will they like it? Do I like it? Doesn't sound good. Did I honor Saturn in Pisces? Am I doing so? I've been having concerns lately. Have I been doing justice with Saturn? Have I been treating Saturn correctly? Have I been doing good? You know, those things. And Saturn is also anxiety. You're anxious. It's that anxiously doing something, wanting to, that devotion to anxiety, to excess sometimes, because you can be overly anxious about something. You're afraid to do something wrong. That's why there can be delays. It's the contraction. Um, so there can be anxiety about your creative endeavors. How will that be accepted? Did I even manage to say what I wanted to say? That can also happen during this transit. Um, Other things. Well, because Saturn is dedication, then dedicating time to your feet, to your, the skin, the bones, the nails, the feet of the feet, um, and whoopsie, and being creative, dedicating time to being creative, devotion. This is the type of devotion that Saturn brings to Pisces. Yes. Also dedicating time to deal with those mundane aspects of also bureaucracy. The bureaucracy around being creative. A business is also a creative endeavor. Okay? So let's say you have a creative business. Now Saturn in Pisces might get you to do the nitty gritty of, now you need an accountant, and now you need a lawyer, now you need a website for which you need a lawyer, and then you need people to pay you, and then, deal with your credit history to get credits. Okay? Now it's time to do that. Even now, when Saturn is in Aquarius, it's always good to prepare ahead of time. But Saturn, you're never wrong preparing ahead of time. Already starting to do Saturn in Pisces when Saturn is in Aquarius. Victor has also been talking about it. I love that. I love that. This is a very good advice. Um, More Saturn in Pisces. So, taking time to feel. Taking time to feel the feelings that you've been avoiding. And Saturn can be, yes, Saturn can emotionally, yes, it can be anxiety, it can be depression, and it can be a booming of people trying to take medicine for depression. Yeah. But Neptune is also, it's medicine and ideation, so the ideation around medicines against depression. Yes, dear. Yes, dear. Oh, so that can be also hereditary. Oh my gosh, because Saturn is time, its ancestors, the past, the dead, hereditary diseases. Claiming that every disease is hereditary, claiming that depression is hereditary, or alternatively, finally finding out that depression is not hereditary. Um, okay, thinking that your ailment is hereditary, explaining ailments, medicine is something that you inherit. Um, that can be a pitfall of this time. Um, fearing that you will pass your emotional condition along the lineage of time. That can be a bummer because it's not necessarily true. Your emotional condition might just be, you know, ancestral healing related. And perhaps ancestral healing is a better way to deal with that than taking medication and believing that, you won't have children because so and so they might catch that and that ailment. Not necessarily. No, not necessarily. Okay, the times change and the way we see our well being changes and so on and so forth. But Saturn in Pisces can bring the hereditary, the feeling that your depression or anxiety is hereditary, and there is nothing to do with that, and then you will pass it on to your children. No, but that's something that people might think or might say with Saturn in Pisces. Um, but again, Saturn is the accumulation of implication of something that's done over time. So if over time other things are done, you change even your hereditary ailments. I seriously doubt that they're actually going to talk about it with Saturn in Pisces, because Saturn is tradition and Pisces is, emotions and stuff. It's not revolutionary, it's not Aquarius, it's not, um, yeah, it's not the mercurial. It's Jupiter and Neptune, so we can get dystopian. Oh, Jupiter! Ooh, Jupiter! Remember the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction? Now, Saturn in Pisces. Pisces is ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter is also a worldview with philosophy, higher philosophy, how we look at the world, our religious, so dystopian religion. All in all, quite a contracting time. Okay? Dystopian religions. Religions that honor time. But then there is something that can also be beautiful about it. Religions that honor taking the time to reflect, to feel things. Okay? Philosophies that honor taking the time to retreat and feel things, the good and the bad and the contraction and the expansion and all that. Okay? Taking the time to be with the void. That is something that's actually positive that can happen with that. Um, what's more? Saturn in Pisces. Well, if first of all, right now Saturn is still in Aquarius. It turns direct on the 23rd of October this year, and it will, move towards Pisces. If you're watching it when Saturn is in Pisces, or before that, try to think what happened around 28, 29 years ago. Okay, I was around 8 or 9. I don't want to think about. Whoa. Okay, not the way. Oh, fuck. Not the way I wanted to remember that next point. Um, I'll save you the trigger warning. It's not useful for you to know that. But you know, Pisces, because it's medicine, it's also, it's not, well, it's, because it's medicine, it can be hospitals. So rules and regulations over hospitals. Um, yeah, being in hospital because of something bone related, or you know, nails related or something like that. Um, so for some people, let's say if you have, you know, if it's happening in your 12th, yeah, you might find yourself in the hospital for something. Um, or volunteering for people in hospital can be a good remedy for that. But then you might volunteer for people in hospital and catch a disease and be hospitalized, and then, you know, the remedy didn't quite work because it's the 12th house. It's going to do what it's going to do. If it's in your 12th, yeah? Um, so, yeah, that's maybe, you know, hospitals. Um, wow, this brings, you know, because Neptune is medicine, and Saturn is also people that are ruling or people that are old father figures. It can be, you know, Neptune is people that are crooked. So there can be some crooked doctors, you know, there can be. Doesn't have to be. But it's, or the alternatively spiritual doctors. They can be charlatans. Um, or alternatively, people who are genuinely spiritual. So, yeah. Yeah. So that's Saturn in Pisces. Um, and doctors, what else do they do? They save lives. Okay, so Neptune tends to get into relationships with like savior victim the dynamic. Um, and so with Saturn, there can be dynamics around Saturnian figures in your life, depending, you know, on the natural, on the person. Dynamics with Saturn figures in your life that are Neptunian, huh? That are not so. Um, this is not necessarily a happy time for relationship with authority. Authorities can be a bit crooked, okay? Or alternatively, they can be genuinely spiritual. So it can go both ways. There's a certain sort of surrender to certain fated events. Um, so yeah, it does mean that the Saturnian figure is either trying to do something, but in methods that are not fitting the domain, um, or it's crooked. The Saturnian figure being, you know, um, not honest, like deliberately, or that gaslights itself somehow. And those can be the people, you know, again, joining that with Pluto entering Aquarius, so that can be the medical people, the people that's supposed to guide, to train healers. There's just, they might not be the best. spiritual teachers. Okay, so that's something that can happen. Uh, and yeah, and it's not going to make any significant aspects with Pluto, so I don't necessarily see that can go unnoticed sometimes. The other things that can be, certain doctors can be missing. Doctors could go missing, healers can go missing. Another thing that can be, okay, because these are also the people, doctors, healers, also the people that can die. Um, so missing doctors. Um, it doesn't necessarily have to be on political reasons. It can be just, the type of people who die at this time. We tend to be, musicians and so, but also doctors, healers, energy workers sometimes, or people who work with water, oceanic, what I previously said. But yes, it can also mean that these people can go missing, or that we find them dead. Um, so it can be an ending to certain mysteries that even began 28 years ago, but also the beginning of new mysteries. Maybe, not necessarily. But you have to think, what happened in your life 28, 29 years ago, around these times of Saturn nature. You will know this. It was a contraction of something. You begin to be either devoted to something. It was, yeah, it was something significant for you. Saturn going through, just like right now, if you think in 27 years ago, you would also find something significant that happened with Saturn in Aquarius. Um, so yeah, trying to say Saturn, Saturn, Saturn. Now I'm like, what's that? What is Patrick going to come up with? What is Patrick going to come up with? Ah, not sure. What is it gonna break? I don't know. Um, more Saturn in Pisces. So Jupiter. Jupiter is both gurus and children. Ah, yes, of course, children that are dead. Yes, of course. Um, Not necessarily. It's one of the significations. It can just be a creative project that you're actually achieving. Um, mm, mm, mm. More Saturn in Pisces. What do you want to talk about? I think that's it. I think that's it. We talked about Pisces as Neptune. Talked about Pisces as Jupiter. Um, yeah. Oh, well, of course, it can be certain sort of regulations on travels, but travels to faraway lands, and because Pisces is like overseas kind of travel, and Saturn can be delays or difficulties or bureaucracy to do with that. That's needed, new bureaucracy to do with that, but it can also mean new rules that can actually, that take time to establish but might actually allow traveling overseas. Because it also be completion of something. Um, so yeah, for people who are overseas, let's say you're living overseas and you're living overseas that is not ninth house but the 12th house overseas, like almost exile, you might finalize getting, residence from the country that you're now immigrated to. This can also happen actually. Depending on the house, you would need a house signification for that. If this is the 12th house, it can actually happen, you know. Or losing, yes, this also can be losing. Maybe you need to give up the previous residency that you owned, or I don't know, you moved to America and now you're like getting a green card, but you have to give up dual citizenship. I heard the United States want to give up dual citizenship because some people have been trying to renounce their residence for tax purposes, which is actually not possible legally, I think. But there's also the countries that are like giving up dual citizenship. The Pisces is duality. So non-duality, near-death experience, we talked about this. Cosmology-wise, non-duality, the booming of non-duality, trying to make sense of non-dualities in ways that are ridiculous. That can also be the case. A non-dual reality, non-duality in medicine, the complex relationships between body and mind, and trying to regulate that. Um, non-duality, yeah, it's the non-dual nature of Pisces that Saturn is just like, what the heck is going on? Because it tries to make sense of things. Um, what else? I don't know. Duality, or you might experience this as duality. Again, something that is, you know, this fish swims here, that fish swims there. So, and Saturn regulation. So this is how dual nationality. It's like, oh, you're gonna have to decide. You're having this nationality or that. No, I'm having dual nationality. I don't want that to happen. Don't make me choose between my fatherland and my motherland. Um, Saturn in Pisces might do that, but Pisces is the first house for me. Although the natal is in the ninth. Um, so bureaucracy, right? Bureaucracy. Things being unclear. Trying to set bureaucratic policies, but the policies being unclear. Nobody knows how to actually implement them. Okay, we talked about this, but this is, from the bureaucracy side, it can be that the Pisces is very non-verbal, so you give Pisces rules and regulations and procedures, and Pisces like it's gonna flow. You give it a structure, it's going to flow downstream, or it's going to flow somehow. Um, and the current, it cannot easily be predicted. So um, yeah. Uh, Pisces can also relate to the international sphere being in the sense of having no boundaries. But Saturn is boundaries, borders, dissolutions of borders, okay? While this is not a very political sign, the adjoinment, and I haven't yet touched Pluto in Aquarius, but the adjoining of boundaries and structure, Saturn, and that which is cannot be regulated, the international sphere, they can be weird attempts to create one world government that are not actually possible to implement. But think about what happened during COVID. Okay, how many people, how much COVID regulations tourism was around? How many people travel to a country that's more or less regulated? How many people left their country because of regulations? tax and debts. Okay, tax and debts, tourism. The people who, travel to Dubai to have business because it's a tax haven. Again, traveling overseas to a very far land from the land that you were born because of tax, because of debt. That's how the United States was founded. Okay. Um, and so it's a sort of for some people exile, but for some people it's just a decision. Uh, and so there can be people who are going to try to regulate something, and then people begin to travel overseas or to sail in order to avoid these regulations, because these regulations are genuinely not fitting the domain that they're trying to regulate. Okay, when Saturn entered Aquarius, it entered a home sign. So if we thought what was done during COVID when Saturn was in Capricorn and in Aquarius was ridiculous, imagine Saturn in Pisces. Okay, this is a complete satire of rules and regulations. And so we could get a lot of situations where people are like, if you want to be sane, if you want to be healthy, you can't obey the law. You can't obey the regulations, but it's not for Revolutionary Freedom Act. It's just because the flow of life and the flow of living is just not going together with, imagine Saturn regulations, the regulations over water. And then that started happening. Like there was a notes in the Netherlands government published signs that like you can only shower for 2 minutes or 5 minutes shower, and they put the sign, they showed like the shower, and only 5 minutes shower. It's not possible. Okay, you must break the law. But it's not a break in the law that you do from being a revolution. You're just taking a shower. It's impossible to if you have, let's say, long hair and you wash your hair. It takes more than 5 minutes. If you wash your baby or you wash your dog and that dog is dirty, it takes more than 5 minutes. It's not that you're rebelling. It's not that like they're limiting my freedom. I'm gonna fly away to this country where they don't limit my freedom or where I don't have to put that mask. No, it's like I need to wash this dog, or or the germs and the sand is going to be all over the place. So I must clean the dog. It takes more than 5 minutes. Okay. There's no way I cannot break the law and have that dog being clean. And there's no way that dirty dog is in the house and that being healthy. So that is the kind of, we're going to see that. Okay, what are you gonna do? Um, and that's something that it's not like with Saturn in Capricorn, it could be like people having to steal food from the grocery store because they don't have food. Saturn in Aquarius, people who have a panic attack, having to take off the mask because they need to breathe air. But other than that, it was like, okay, I want my freedom. Oh goddamn, you don't. Saturn in Pisces is like, I I need to shower. You know that I need to drink water to live. If you say, oh, you can only have, 5 cups of water, of distilled water, each, employee or whatnot, it's not possible. Um, but I find, more like dirt or mud, having to wash away mud, having to wash mud, or having to wash polluted water. It's like trying to regulate something that you absolutely can't obey, but not because you're a rebel, but because it's like it's absolutely not possible to regulate that. Um, or trying to regulate the way that people feel about something. Oh, it's like a person being, I am a person having, the emotions that any Piscean would experience, and that's like depression or anxiety next to Saturn, and Saturn trying to regulate that emotions, like, or saying it's not okay to feel this way, or you must take this pill because you feel this way, and but that's not the way of emotions. They are not going to adhere um, to a regulation. And this is also why certain pills that meant to regulate emotions do not work, because emotions are genuine responses to world events. This is absolutely Saturn in Pisces. Saturn in Pisces facing something that is dead, facing fear. Okay? Fear is normal. You don't take a pill to regulate fear. If you do, it's because you're doing 10 other things that the pill is just, one stream, one voice, one part of. But there are things you have to change in this concrete reality. And this does not necessarily have to come from Saturn figure. It can come from the people that they can think, oh, I need to take, maybe if I take this pill, I will feel better and I will not be anxious and I will be able to do that. Um, and that's okay. That might work for some. But some people may say, well, maybe, I feel anxious. Maybe I will just take a sleeping pill and I'll just go to sleep, without thinking, oh, how am I going to use that pill that I'm taking to make that concrete change in my life and tackle those things that I fear, and do something about that. And then the pill does not work. Okay. So, medicine, Neptune, is an assistant to making that change, that concrete change, step by step change that Saturn requires. Because it does bring an anxiety, it does bring fear, it does bring angst, it does bring depression sometimes, because it's a boundary. And then we have an emotional reaction to that boundary that Saturn presents. But it can also bring a sense of safety, a sense of something to rely on, a sense of devotion, a sense of dedication. And those are also emotions that we can count on. It can also bring a sense of, I'm tackling those emotions and I'm writing a song that is going to inspire people on how I dealt with that depression, and I'm going to put that into music, and then people are going to listen to this music and they're going to be healed by just listening to me. And that can save lives. So music is able to save lives. Again, life or death, Saturn. Able to save lives because you dealt with something that could have killed you. That could have you could have tried to take your life, but instead you wrote a song, instead you made music, and now people listen to the music so they can relate, they can feel with the music, and then they actually um, are able to deal with that difficulty with the harshness that reality, sometimes brings. That thing, that is dead, or that experiences. Another thing that can happen is that the escapism that you get when facing that. I can actually give a concrete example. When I had, grown plants, and then two of my plants died, and I was still watering the dead plants. And then one of my doggy sittings, I was a week away and only came to water the plants. And then when I came back, I bought me, some pasta, and I was like channeling, and then uh, telling myself a lot of jokes and eating and so, and watering the plants and taking all the trash away, and taking, all the things from the fridge that are no longer needed, and then quickly taking the plants, the dead plants away. And then it's like, whew, we dealt with that. We dealt with it. Now let's eat some chocolate, or let's do some, and kind of making yourself happy, making yourself escape the depth of the fear that you're, unable, as the Piscean part of your chart is unable to process all that depth of all that loss of a plant that died. Okay, of something that, to another person could seem like insignificant. This happens, but you're still watering that plant as if it was alive. That is exactly, but the use of escapism, the use of a funny story, the use of art, the use of music, the use of let's eat something sweet, let's this, and then, or think about children. How do you take a child to the dentist? You have a gas that is a laughter gas, so the child laughs, and then the doctor kind of makes, funny jokes, and it's like an outer worldly experience, and so and so. And then, you do the treatment, and it's gone, it's gone, it's gone. We're past that already. So that is also something we might see with Saturn in Pisces. Us using the artistic world, a little bit of escapism, to tackle those little sadnesses, those those not so little deaths of life. That you're so immersed in this euphoric plane that, you're able to deal, you're able to take away, that which is dead, and that's important. Using escapism to deal with grieving, the grieving process. Um, so I think I've tackled quite a lot, quite a lot. I'm still not sure if, if I got what that Patrick wanted to talk about. Um, but that challenge was beautiful. You just put a tweet out there. It's like, I don't think anybody is going to talk about what I found with Saturn in Pisces. Like, I'm going to research all of Saturn in Pisces and see if I come up with that. I don't know, but it was still worth it, right? Um, so there you have it, Saturn in Pisces. I'm talking about the transit now. Of course, you can, if you have that placement natally, especially what I said about how to deal with grieving applies, or writing music that is helping you to cope with that contraction, the anxiety, or whatever Saturn brings emotionally to your life, and find dedication and find light there, and be able to bring that light to the world. Um, yeah. Yes, Saturn returns in Pisces, of course, it's related, but every Saturn return is related to, those 28, 27, 28 club, Saturn return club, whatnot. Um, it exists, that is a part of the significations of both Saturn and Pisces, because Pisces is also ruled by Neptune. Okay? Uh, More on Jupiter. Jupiter abundance, again, abundance, seeing abundance in the simple things, seeing abundance in this moment, this step. and then that step, and then that step. Because Saturn contracts. So there's a sense of contraction to your abundance, but it brings birth. It's the birthing of something. Okay, expansion and contraction. So the contraction before you something is birthed. You know, think about the babies growing in the womb, growing in the womb, growing in the womb. Then there are the contractions before birth, and they're painful. However orgasmic your birth is, it's painful. However much oxytocin you have, then you're supposed to have there, you're orgasming a baby to life, and that contraction is Saturn. It's like, okay, the womb is now, it has been a warm house now, no longer, this is no longer the right environment for you. You need to move into the life. That can also be Saturn. Contracting there to make the end of a phase of something and the beginning of another. Um, and so there can be contraction around that fertility, or contraction around that which we think is abundant. Um, but that contraction actually brings something concrete, something real to life. But yes, sometimes that real thing is that, okay. Um, more on Jupiter. Yeah, I think we had enough. Should I do? If I do the 12 signs, I will do it in a separate video. I don't think I need to. Do I need to do the 12 signs? If you want the 12 signs, comment in the comments below, and then of course there might be a delay, Saturn, until I do it, but I might do it. But you're gonna have to speak up. You're gonna have to tell me that you want it. Um, so that was Saturn in Pisces. See you in my next video. I'm Tali Shearer on Twitter, Shirley Youngblood on Instagram, Shirley Tali Youngblood on Facebook, but I'm not that much on Facebook. So Twitter or Instagram. I do readings. Again, you're gonna have to contact me for that. And I'll see you in my next video. That was Saturn in Pisces. I recorded Saturn in Pisces. Bye bye.